Before we begin, this story hit close. My mom works in an office, so these situations feel real to me. This isn't just video for clicks, it's based on real emotional experiences. All names, companies, and places have been changed. I made this so people could recognize themselves and maybe avoid making the same mistakes. Let's get into it.
The morning sun had barely lifted when I unlocked the gate and stepped into the driveway. The gravel crunched beneath my tires like it was protesting my return. His name was still on the placard by the door: Mark Holden, architect. The letters had dulled, but they hadn't faded, not like everything else. I stood there for a while, just staring at the front steps. I used to sit on those steps with coffee while he sketched floor plans on napkins. Sometimes I'd bring him lunch and catch him humming Sinatra with a pencil tucked behind his ear. It used to be endearing. Now it just felt like a ghost humming in my ears. Before we go further, can I ask one small thing? If you're listening and feeling even a hint of something, curiosity, sadness, that twinge behind your ribs, please like this video and subscribe. 97% of listeners never do, but it truly helps the team bring more stories like this to life. All right, back to it. Inside the office, nothing had moved. Not the framed blueprints above the mantel, not the porcelain mug with the chipped handle that still smelled faintly of dark roast. His desk chair faced the window, as if he might return and spin it around at any moment. A part of me expected to hear his voice greet me. "Hey, Elle, did you see the sunrise today?" I hadn't changed a single thing. Couldn't. Every time I tried, I'd stand frozen in the doorway like I was waiting for permission to grieve properly. And somehow, after 11 months, I still wasn't sure how to do that. Mark was gone, and yet I was still hosting him like a phantom tenant in the rooms he left behind. Nathan and Lucas, our boys, had been gently pressuring me. Nathan, the pragmatic one, said the office needed repair before the structure gave way. Lucas just looked at me with those soft brown eyes and asked if it was okay to start healing. That one broke me more than the funeral did, so I made the call. Carter and Sons. Restoration had good reviews, and Eric, the foreman, seemed kind when we walked through the space. He didn't prod, didn't give me that patronizing, grieving widow look, just nodded when I told him to keep the bones intact. "Let the space breathe again," I said. "Just surface work, no digging." God, I should have known better. I handed over the keys that Friday morning and left quietly. I didn't look back. Drove straight to the church for the annual memorial service. Mark's name would be read aloud, and I'd sit there with my hands folded and pretend I didn't notice the pity stares or the women whispering about how strong I was. But even as I sat in the pew, hymn book clutched like a lifeline, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting, like the air back at the office had grown heavier the moment I walked away. The kind of pressure you feel right before a storm breaks, where the clouds haven't opened yet, but the sky's already threatening. There's a strange kind of guilt that comes with survival. I'd felt it every day since he died, but that day, it was different. That day, the guilt had teeth, and before the service was even half over, I'd realize why. It wasn't grief keeping me from opening that office, it was instinct. Some part of me had always known, but what none of us knew, not me, not Nathan, not Lucas, was that Mark hadn't just built blueprints in that space, he'd built secrets. And one of them was about to crack the whole damn foundation wide open. I never was the type to leave my phone on during church, but something about that morning made me forget to silence it. Midway through the third hymn, "It is well with my soul," I felt the faint vibration against the side of my leg, tucked deep inside my purse. I let it go to voicemail out of instinct, but the buzz came again. Then a third time. Something crawled up the back of my neck. Not panic exactly, more like that tight, coiling feeling when the air shifts just before lightning. I slipped out the side door as quietly as I could, heels clicking against the old church tile. I didn't even wait to get outside. Pressed the voicemail against my ear, thumb trembling over the phone. "Mrs. Holden, it's Eric from Carter and Sons. We found something sealed behind a false wall. I really need you to come look, but don't come alone. Bring your sons." He said it calmly, like he was reading off a checklist, but his breath hitched at the end. That hitch said more than the words did. My stomach dropped. Not out of fear, out of knowing, deep knowing, the kind that whispers, "You're not done grieving, not yet." I called him back immediately, barely hearing the ring. He picked up on the first one. "Eric, What is it? I asked, already walking toward the parking lot. He took a breath. It's not dangerous, just emotional. Emotional. That word hit me like a punch, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. It was careful, controlled, like someone trying not to set off a landmine. Can you tell me more? A pause. I think it's better if you see it, and you should bring Nathan and Lucas, please. I stared out across the lot. A few cars passed by on Main Street. The autumn breeze had picked up, pulling dry leaves into spirals. In the distance, I could still hear the organ playing, but it felt like I'd stepped into another world, one where everything was about to shift again, and I had no say in the matter. What do I tell them? I asked, voice low. Whatever you want, Eric said, but I promise you this, whatever it is, it's yours to know, no one else's. I hung up and stood still, letting the weight of it settle. The last time I felt that kind of dread was the night the coroner called. "Are you sitting down?" he'd said, and everything had gone quiet, like the world was holding its breath for what came next. I didn't go back into the sanctuary, didn't wait for the closing hymn or the hugs in the fellowship hall. I texted the boys, "Meet me at the car, now," and waited by the passenger door, heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to crawl out. Nathan was first. He jogged across the sidewalk with that same protective look he wore at the funeral, like he had to hold both of us up. "What's wrong?" Lucas followed behind, slower, staring at his phone. "Are we leaving?" "I got a call from the contractor," I said. "They found something." Nathan's eyes narrowed. "Like what?" I shook my head. He didn't say, just that we should see it. All of us. Lucas blinked. "Is it a body?" "No," I said too quickly. "No, it's not that." But even saying it, I realized I had no idea. I just didn't want to believe it could be. Mark's death had been ruled a heart attack, sudden, clean, or at least that's what I'd told myself. Maybe I needed to believe that version just to survive it. As we got in the car and pulled away from the church, the silence between us stretched taut. Nathan tapped his knee against the door, watching the trees blur past. Lucas kept glancing at me in the mirror. "Do you think Dad left something for us?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I said. "But whatever it is, he hid it for a reason." What I didn't say, what I couldn't say out loud, was that I wasn't sure I wanted to find it, because whatever was waiting behind that false wall had been hidden on purpose. And Mark wasn't the kind of man who did things without reason. The truth is, I'd spent almost a year trying to make peace with his absence. Now, I was being summoned back into his presence by a contractor who sounded like he'd seen a ghost. And I wasn't ready for that ghost to wear Mark's face. We didn't speak much after we pulled away from the church, just the hum of the tires on old asphalt and the occasional rustle of leaves hitting the windshield. The kind of silence that's less about calm and more about bracing for impact. Nathan sat beside me, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitch just beneath his cheek. Lucas had pulled his hoodie over his head in the back seat, earphones in, but I could tell he wasn't playing anything, just pretending. After a few minutes, Nathan broke the quiet. "You gonna tell us what's going on?" I handed him my phone. "Play the voicemail." He listened. Twice. Said nothing for a beat, then finally, "That's a weird thing to say. Don't come alone? That's not how people talk unless..." He didn't finish. Didn't need to. My heart was already racing far ahead of my thoughts. And Lucas? He hadn't said a word since we left the church, but I saw the way his foot bounced softly against the seat in front of him. My youngest had always been sensitive to the things people didn't say. We passed Miller's farm stand, then the old train bridge where Mark used to take the boys fishing. Funny, how many times I'd driven this exact route, how familiar every curve was. But this time, every landmark felt like it was watching us. The mailbox we once repainted, the gas station where Mark taught Nathan how to check tire pressure, all of them just still, like they knew something we didn't. "I thought we were done with all this," I said aloud, mostly to myself. Lucas finally spoke. "We never really started." He was right. After Mark died, I held everything in, took care of the paperwork, planned the service, cooked meals I barely touched. I didn't cry much, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how to without breaking in half. And if I broke, who would hold the boys? So I'd packed up my grief in neat, labeled boxes. Dad's ties, Mark's college ring, framed awards, stacked them in the attic, and told myself that was healing. But healing doesn't call you in the middle of a hymn. It doesn't leave cryptic messages with words like emotional and bring your sons. When we finally pulled into the office driveway, I saw Eric standing just outside the entrance, holding a set of blueprints like a shield. He looked like he hadn't slept. Face pale, eyes sunken. Not scared exactly, but rattled. Like whatever he'd seen had stripped something basic from him. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just nodded once. Nathan was out of the car before I'd fully parked. "Hey," he called. "What did you find?" Eric didn't answer. Instead, he stepped aside and motioned toward the door, holding it open with one hand. I followed, Lucas close behind me. The air inside hit different, thicker, like the walls were holding their breath. Dust floated in slanted light from the front window, swirling slowly like something had recently disturbed the stillness, which it had. The bookshelf, Mark's floor-to-ceiling wall of architectural classics, old journals, dog-eared magazines, was gone. Or rather, it had been moved aside, revealing the pale, unfinished drywall behind it. Except, not all of it was drywall. A rectangular outline had been carved into the far right panel. Newer paint, just slightly different. Sealed edges. Eric finally spoke. It wasn't on any of the plans, not the original build-outs, not the permits. It's like someone built it after everything was already done. Just this one sealed space. No light, no airflow. Just hidden. Lucas whispered, "A panic room." Eric shook his head. Too small, no ventilation, and no access from the outside. You'd have to know it was there, and want it hidden. I moved toward it slowly, each step making the floorboards creak in a way I'd never noticed before. I pressed my hand to the outline. Cold. "How did you find it?" I asked. "We were rerouting the crown molding," he said. "It didn't line up. There was an extra 2 feet unaccounted for on the wall measurements. That's when we realized the bookshelf was sitting on a false base. And behind it, this." Nathan crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. "So it was like a secret room?" Eric didn't answer right away. He just turned and picked up a crowbar from the floor, the kind with old paint flakes stuck to the tip. "I haven't opened it yet," he said. "Thought you should be here when I did." Something about the way he said it made my throat tighten. Like he wasn't just handing me a tool. He was handing me a key to a door that should have never existed. Lucas stepped closer to me, almost touching my sleeve. "You okay, Mom?" I nodded, but I wasn't. Because deep down, I'd already decided something. Mark built that wall, not a contractor, not an architect from his team. He built it himself. And whatever was behind it, he never meant for us to see. But we were here now, and there was no going back. The sound the wall made when it opened wasn't dramatic, no cinematic crack or echoing groan, just a dry, reluctant sigh as if the house itself was disappointed to give up the secret. Eric pried the final board loose and stepped back, letting the panel fall forward with a muted thud. Behind it wasn't some grand chamber or steel vault. It was small, cramped even, just 6 feet wide, maybe 4 deep. The air that rushed out smelled old, metallic, and faintly sweet, like aged paper soaked in time. A narrow desk sat flush against the far wall, its legs uneven and hastily cut. A single folding chair rested beside it, the kind you buy from a hardware store when you don't plan to sit long. No light, no decor, just function and intention. Nathan squinted inside first. "What the hell?" Lucas hung back. Always the watcher. His hand touched the edge of the doorframe, but he didn't cross it. I stepped in. The dust was thick. No footprints, no disturbance. Like this space hadn't been touched since Mark sealed it off, maybe years ago. I ran my fingers along the desk, leaving a clear streak through the grime. Then I saw it. A folder. Manila. Thick with paper. On the front, written in bold black Sharpie in handwriting I'd know anywhere, his block letters, slightly slanted left, Holden. I didn't move right away. My breath caught in my throat. My name, our name, never looked heavier than it did scrawled on that file. Eric must have seen my hands start to shake because he gently took a step forward and offered, "Do you want me to?" I shook my head. "No, I've got it." I opened the folder, slowly, carefully. The first few pages were spreadsheets, numbers, dates, balances, but the bank names weren't familiar. Credit unions from states we'd never lived in, routing numbers, account numbers, and transfers, lots of them. Monthly, precise. I flipped to the next section, receipts, tuition payments, grocery bills, rent, one recurring charge from a childcare center, all signed, all his signature. Nathan leaned in. Wait, these aren't ours. We don't bank with any of these places. I know, I said, my voice dry. Lucas spoke from the doorway. Is it work stuff, like for clients? But we all knew it wasn't. One document caught my eye, a printed bank statement, 2 pages long, a regular outgoing transfer to a woman's name I didn't recognize. Same amount, every month, for years. Another transfer, same woman, but a different bank, smaller deposits, untraceable if you weren't looking. And beneath that, photos, not a lot. Just 2, tucked loosely at the back of the folder like an afterthought, or a dare. The first was of a woman, probably in her late 30s, sitting on a porch I didn't recognize, holding a mug, half smiling at the camera. The second was her and a teenage boy, his arm looped casually around her shoulder, leaning in like they'd done it 1,000 times before. The boy's face stopped me cold. Something about the angle of the jaw, the eyes, the way his smile curved, just a little crooked, like Mark's did when he was amused but didn't want to admit it. I handed the photo to Nathan. He blinked. Jesus. He looks like... Lucas's voice was barely audible. Dad. I sat down in the folding chair, the cold metal biting through my coat. The folder slid off my lap and hit the floor, pages spilling like teeth from a busted mouth. I didn't pick them up, because I was already trying to remember every lie that now wore a different mask, every time he came home late, every client dinner, every unexplained withdrawal I brushed off as business. This wasn't an affair. It wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a second life. Quiet. Contained. Hidden behind a bookshelf and sealed with drywall. A life where our name was still used, but not for us. Mark hadn't just betrayed me. He'd invested in someone else. And whatever else was in that room, it was only the beginning. Nathan was already on the floor, cross-legged, papers spread out in piles like some forensic accountant piecing together a cold case. He had Mark's old reading glasses perched on his nose, the ones that had sat untouched in the top drawer of the desk until Eric had moved it to get to the safe. Watching my son sift through his father's secrets with surgical precision felt like being dissected from the inside. These aren't just accounts, he muttered, eyes scanning one statement after another. They're payments, scheduled, automated. I didn't answer. My fingers were locked together in my lap, knuckles white. I couldn't unclench, couldn't even breathe right. Mom. Nathan's voice slowed. This one's been going out every first Monday of the month, same amount, same name for 11 years. He laid the paper flat and pointed to a name I'd never seen before in my life. Danielle Monroe. Lucas, who'd been silent in the corner with a second folder, suddenly let out a sharp breath. I think you should see this, he said, holding something up without looking at me. Photos, glossy, candid, nothing posed. One of the women smiling beside a Christmas tree, lights glowing behind her. Another at a park bench with a boy about Lucas's age throwing a football toward the camera. His hair was dark, messy, his grin easy. Then a third photo. The woman, Danielle, with the boy standing next to her. He couldn't have been more than 6 in the photo, holding a handmade birthday card. A messy crayon drawing spelled out, "To Dad." The way he smiled in that photo, slightly crooked. That same tilt in the eyebrows. That exact dimple Mark had that only showed when he laughed from the belly. It hit me like a punch straight to the ribs. I stood too fast and had to steady myself against the wall. Lucas looked up. He looks like Dad. No, Nathan said, softer. He is Dad. That's his kid. I pressed a hand to my mouth, not to stop myself from screaming, but because something inside me had started cracking. Slow, deliberate cracks, like ice under weight. There was no sob, no moan, just pressure building in places I didn't know could hold it. 11 years. He had paid her rent, covered school tuition, bought plane tickets, sent birthday money. The transfers didn't stop. not even during the months Mark was hospitalized for stress. While I was sitting in the waiting room clutching his hand in mine, worrying if he'd pull through, he was still paying Danielle. I staggered toward the edge of the desk and sat down, shaking. Nathan's voice was steady, but it was the kind of steadiness that comes from not knowing what else to do. He set it up like a damn maintenance contract. It's like he managed them. Lucas was flipping through more papers. She wasn't hiding. Look, this is a lease with both their names on it, notarized. I snatched the page from his hand. Mark Holden and Danielle Monroe, joint tenancy agreement dated 9 years ago, signed, witnessed. Nathan had gone quiet. He leaned back against the wall and let his head thump gently once, twice, as if trying to jolt himself back into a different version of reality. Did he ever talk about her? Lucas asked me too quietly. No, I whispered. Not once. But I remembered now. 3 summers ago, Mark went to Denver for a conference. I asked to come with him. He said it was a quick trip, not worth the flight. I stayed home with the boys, planted tomatoes, fixed the dishwasher. That's where the lease was from, Denver. Another time, he sent a photo of a sunset from a client's deck. But now that I was staring at the same view taped to the back of a folder, I realized it wasn't a client's anything. It was her porch. She didn't just have his money. She had his presence, his inside jokes, his Sunday mornings, maybe even his dumb Sinatra humming and his habit of chewing pens when he was thinking. And for 11 years, I had shared him with a stranger I never even knew existed. Until now. Lucas sat beside me. What do we do? I didn't know. I truly didn't. Because this wasn't an affair. It wasn't a mistake. It was a life. A built, sustained, protected life. One he crafted with as much care as the home he built with me. But only one of those lives got the funeral. Only one of those lives got the folded flag, the casserole dishes, the sympathetic texts from old friends. The other one? She got the money, the lies, and his legacy. And now I was holding the bill. Her name was Danielle Monroe, a name I'd never heard before the hour prior, and yet now it sat in my mouth like poison I couldn't spit out. Her address was neatly typed on multiple documents: utility bills, insurance papers, even a registration form from a private school. Stapled to that form was a scanned copy of a birth certificate, Eli Monroe. Date of birth, September 14th. Father, Mark Holden. I must have read that line a dozen times, waiting for it to shift into something more palatable. A typo, a forgery, a mistake. But there it was, clear as ink can be. My husband didn't just have a second household. He had a second son. 17, Nathan said under his breath, flipping through another page. He's been lying since before I made varsity. Lucas didn't say a word. He just sat on the floor, elbows on his knees, staring at the corner of the desk like it had done something wrong. We found the house deed next, tucked behind the desk drawer, folded between tax returns. He'd bought it 6 years ago, paid the down payment in cash, mortgage under a trust. The trustee? Me. Not in name, of course. That would have tipped me off. But the ID number linked to the trust matched the one Mark and I used for our family fund. I hadn't seen the match at first, too stunned to connect the dots, but Nathan pointed it out, scanning numbers like a machine. I was listed as the secondary trustee, meaning if Mark died, the responsibility fell to me. There it was again, that quiet, gut-splitting truth. I wasn't just the wife. I was the contingency, the backup plan, the damn emergency contact for the family he built in the shadows. Lucas finally looked up. Did he ever say anything about any of this? No, I croaked. Never. But then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. Christmas Eve, maybe 4 years ago. Mark got a phone call just after dinner, said it was a supplier issue, walked out into the snow without his coat, pacing the driveway for 15 minutes while we sipped cocoa and watched It's a Wonderful Life. When he came back in, his face was pale. I thought it was the cold. Maybe it wasn't. I sat down hard in the folding chair again, like my legs decided they couldn't be part of this anymore. I didn't cry. Couldn't. I was too full of something denser, grief wrapped in cement. Nathan kept pacing, back and forth like a caged animal. Who does this? Who lives like this? He spat. He paid for private school. She didn't work. He bought them a house. And we get what? A funeral and a moldy office? Lucas, still quiet, whispered, "We got half a dad." That cracked something in me. I closed my eyes and tried not to scream. In the safe behind the desk, we found more, a notarized letter. It was addressed to whom it may concern, but in the first paragraph, it named me. If anything happens to me, contact Ellen. She'll know what to do. Know what to do? What the hell was I supposed to do? Send flowers to the woman he played house with? Introduce her son to mine and say, "Surprise, boys, you share DNA"? Manage two grieving households while pretending one didn't eclipse the other. He made me the bridge between them. He didn't just lie to me. He appointed me custodian of the lie. The worst part? The letter wasn't selfish. It was careful, gentle, full of those stupid, earnest phrases Mark always used when he wanted people to feel safe. I never meant to cause harm. Both families matter. You were always my heart. What kind of man builds a life out of blueprints and betrayal and thinks saying sorry in a notarized letter makes it okay? Nathan stopped pacing long enough to say what I couldn't. He gave her everything, and he left us the wreckage. Lucas's voice cracked. Does Eli know about us? We didn't know. That was the silence buzzing in the corners of the room now. Maybe he did. Maybe Mark had painted us as the other family, the distant obligation, the polite fiction. Or maybe he lied to Eli too. Maybe none of us really knew him. But one thing was clear. Mark was gone. And he'd left behind two families. And only one of us had been prepared for that. Me. Because he made sure of it. I sat with the phone in my hand for almost 30 minutes before I dialed. Staring at that number scribbled on the back of a tuition receipt, my thumb hovering over the call button like it might burn me. There were 10,000 ways this could go wrong. Maybe she'd scream. Maybe she'd cry. Maybe she'd play innocent or pretend she didn't know who I was. But what I didn't expect, what I should have expected, was silence. 3 rings, 4, then voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Danielle. Please leave a message." Her voice was soft, measured, a little too smooth for someone who'd shared a man's life for over a decade and never once bothered to reach out when he died. I didn't leave a message. Just ended the call and placed the phone face down on the desk, as if the number itself might leak into the air and rot the wood. Nathan was behind me. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The restraint in my body said enough. I barely slept that night. Somewhere between 2 and 4 a.m., I got up and made coffee I didn't drink. Paged through every folder again like it might look different by moonlight. It didn't. The lie stayed just as thick in the air, even with Mark gone, especially with Mark gone. At 7:14 a.m., I got the email. Subject, Estate Trust Inquiry, Holden. It was from a law office in Colorado, plain language, no drama. Dear Mrs. Holden, per Mr. Holden's trust instructions, a portion of his estate is held in escrow for Ms. Monroe and her son. The account has not been accessed since Mr. Holden's passing. We understand from our client that you attempted to make contact. Please direct further estate-related communication through this channel. Respectfully, Samuel G. Price, Esquire. No explanation, no apology, no shock or shame, just our client. I stared at those words like they were acid. She hadn't answered my call because she'd already handed the mess to a lawyer. Let him deal with me. Let him parse through the damage like I was a business transaction, not the wife her lover left behind with 2 grieving sons and a ledger full of betrayal. So I wrote one reply. I kept it short. Cold. Mr. Price, attached are copies of ledgers, statements, and transaction histories your client may or may not be aware of. Please note the payments continued uninterrupted through multiple events that contradict the limited scope your client has claimed. Additionally, per Mr. Holden's own letter, I was told I'd know what to do. I do. Regards, Ellen Holden. No threats, no fury, just facts. And the implication, I'm not your client's secret. I'm the executor. The woman holding the reins now, and I don't owe anyone silence anymore. Nathan read it over my shoulder and let out a soft whistle. Damn. Lucas didn't say anything. He just stood behind me, eyes wide, like he wasn't sure if this was revenge or responsibility. But it wasn't either. It was reality. I wasn't interested in torching Danielle's life, not out of mercy, but because I knew better than anyone. Scorched earth just leaves ash, and ash doesn't raise sons. Ash doesn't pay property taxes or fund education or keep a name from being dragged through court. Danielle could keep her attorney. Eli could keep the house. But what Mark had built behind my back, that inheritance was going to come with terms. Mine. Because Mark left me more than heartbreak. He left me control. Legal, quiet, absolute. And she hadn't figured that out yet, but she would. It came on a Thursday morning. Brown box, medium-sized, no return address. Just my name in clean block letters on the label, no stamps. Hand-delivered. For a second, I thought it might have been something of Mark's from storage, one of those delayed grief bombs that show up just as the numbness starts to wear off. But it was too precise, too intentional. I opened it in the kitchen, with the boys still asleep upstairs. The first thing I saw was the key, a simple brass house key taped to a note card. No explanation. Just a soft imprint on the card's surface where someone had pressed down too hard while writing, then torn the note off. Below the key were photos, dozens of them. The same ones we'd found behind the wall, and more. Mark with Eli at a baseball game, Mark carrying groceries into a small red brick house I now recognized from the property records. Danielle on a picnic blanket with a smile that didn't look borrowed. There were no duplicates, no flinches, just life, intact, intentional, whole. Near the bottom of the box, nestled between a folded scarf and a manila envelope, was the note. Handwritten, unfolded, the kind of paper you only use when you know you won't get to explain in person. I never asked him to lie. I only asked him to leave you out of it. I didn't know about the trust clause. I didn't want this. Danielle. That was it. No signature, just the name I'd now spent days obsessing over, signed in ink like a soft tap on the shoulder after a punch to the chest. I sat with the box on my lap for over an hour. The coffee beside me went cold. I stared out the window, the wind playing with the edges of the curtain like it was waiting for me to scream or sob or hurl the whole thing across the room. But I didn't. Instead, I took every photo, every receipt, every thread of that second life, and filed it away, chronologically, logically, one folder for financials, one for correspondence, one for Eli, not to bury it, but to contain it, to make sure the life Mark built behind my back didn't unravel the one I had left to live, because grief doesn't negotiate with ghosts. It just demands a place to be stored. Later that afternoon, I called the family attorney. I didn't tell him about the box. I told him we'd be revising the estate documents. I'd like to restructure the discretionary clauses, I said. He hesitated. Ellen, is there a particular concern? Just ensuring clarity, I replied. We're not amending history, just assigning weight where it belongs. He was quiet for a second, then said, Understood. I hung up and stared at the last photo in my hand. Mark, holding Eli on his shoulders in the front yard of that other house, both of them mid-laugh. I didn't feel hate, but I didn't feel pity either. Danielle stepped back, gave it all up, maybe out of shame, maybe out of fear, maybe because she finally realized the name on the trust wasn't hers to manage. Whatever her reason, she'd return the pieces of that world back to me. And I intended to keep them in order, not to protect Mark's legacy, to protect mine and my son's. It was spring by the time the paperwork came together. Probate, transfers, residuals, every line item in the estate combed through, cataloged, notarized, and reduced to signature blocks and legalese. By then, the sharp ache of betrayal had dulled into something colder, something architectural, like grief had become blueprints I could finally read. We sat in the attorney's conference room on a gray Tuesday, the kind of day that could pass unnoticed if you let it. Lucas was beside me, flipping through a copy of the final estate ledger. Nathan leaned back with his arms crossed, jaw set like stone. The executor cleared his throat and slid over a slim folder. This came up during the final review, he said, his voice more cautious than usual. It wasn't in the digital files. Handwritten, tucked into the codicil pages. He opened it, laid it flat between us. Yellowing paper, a little curled at the edges. Mark's handwriting. In the event of moral breach, it read, all discretionary distributions revert to the primary beneficiary. Then a signature. Mark's, 2 witness initials, one of them his old business partner, the other our family notary, dated 7 years ago. I stared at it, every word locking into place like bricks finally finding their mortar. Moral breach, not death, not default, not financial dispute. Moral breach. He knew. He knew what he was doing, knew there was a difference between legal infidelity and personal treason. And deep down, maybe he thought it wouldn't come to light. Or maybe he knew it would. Maybe this clause wasn't for him at all. Maybe it was for me. The executor kept his voice neutral. This effectively cancels the Monroe allocation. All funds return to the Central Trust, to be directed at your discretion. Lucas let out a breath. Nathan nodded once, not in relief, but in confirmation, like the clause just proved something he'd already suspected. I didn't smile, didn't flinch, just folded my hands in my lap. Outside the window, a tree branch tapped softly against the glass, again and again, steady as a metronome. I hadn't heard from Danielle since the box. No calls, no emails, no lawyers, just silence. That, too, felt intentional. She'd stepped away and stayed away, maybe realizing there wasn't a place left for her in the structure Mark built. Not anymore. Later in the car, Lucas asked quietly, "Did he think you'd find it?" I didn't answer for a long time. Then finally, he didn't need me to find it. He just needed to know I could. Because that's who I was to him in the end, not just the wife, not just the backup plan. The anchor, the only one who could hold what he'd built together, even after the truth fractured it. But what Mark never expected was that the fracture would clarify everything, that the dust would settle into new lines, clean and sharp. He tried to divide his life between two homes, two families, two truths, but only one of those truths had a foundation. Only one name remained on the trust, and it was mine. I didn't destroy his second life. I just outlived it, on paper, in court, and in every memory that mattered.